time. I am just giving maybe just another half a minute or so. So I see some people that are joining. So I just want to give a minute and then we'll get kicked off. Get this thing kicked off with you guys. Okay, guys. Happy Wednesday, May 6th. Hope everybody had a nice Cinco de Mayo yesterday. Knocked all the cobwebs out your head from tequila if you decided to indulge. But thank you for taking time to join us on our monthly webinar. We have an interesting topic today that kind of parlays off of the webinar that I did last month, which was around the remote users and enabling the remote workforce and things of that nature. Obviously, desktop as a service is a big component of this. So we wanted to kind of take it to the next level of granularity and really give you an understanding of not really just what RapidScale does and how we're approaching this, but really like what is the market as a whole? Because I think it's important from a consultative perspective that if you're going to have the conversations with the customer on what's available to them, it's good to know what the market looks like, right? Who are the players, who's doing what are the different options, what are the pros, what are the cons? So those are all things that we want to discuss today. Again, for you guys that don't know me, Andrew Lauder, Director of Sales in the East Region. I also have Robert Bergman with us. Robert's our Senior Product Manager and a desktop as a service guru, right? And I work very closely with him, very knowledgeable. So we asked him to join us just to, for one, keep me honest, right? But also to add some additional information and flavors so you guys can truly know, truly understand it. So as always, these are being recorded. And obviously, we're going to send them out to you as well as the deck. You guys can have that. There's some language in here. Don't pay so much attention to what's written, right? In terms of reading it, we'll make sure we get this for you, so you don't have to take notes. Okay, so laying down the ground floor. So why is the market adopting DaaS? I think we all understand now that, especially within the given times, that companies have been exposed to their gaps and limitations around accessing their core line of business applications. We certainly don't ever want to see this happen, but it has really brought some of these weaknesses to the forefront, which is going to open the door for new technologies to come in and be able to augment those weaknesses. So what are people really looking for? Obviously, the flexibility. So hiring location, not hiring talent, not locations. Giving the ability to work from home, big thing right now, right? While still being in a full production mode. Next is the confidentiality of the data, right? Data integrity. If they're outside the four walls, not connected to the local area network, how are they accessing it? What are they accessing? Is the data secure? Is it safe? It's a big component for this because the ability to access the data is great, but if it's not secure and opens up weaknesses and gaps, then we certainly don't want that. Obviously, uninterrupted access, the capital costs. I mean, times like these too, right, where we're seeing that companies, their revenue numbers have gone down from an AR perspective. So, having some type of fixed costs around the technology is good, especially to avoid any type of large capital expenditure. And then, of course, attracting talent. I mean, people want to work in talent. IT employees want to be able to say that they had their hand in managing a DaaS environment or some type of more cutting-edge technology, because that's a resume builder for them. So, everybody kind of wins across the board. So the first thing I want to talk about is kind of the different terminology. So VDI and DaaS are used very interchangeably, but they're two different things theoretically. So VDI, right, which is the virtual desktop infrastructure, is essentially doing it yourself, right? Whether you have a co-location facility or you have your own hardware, you're going out and you're procuring the licensing like a Citrix or VMware Horizon licensing. You have your own employees that are standing it up, they're managing those farms or publishing the applications. You're doing it yourself. That is traditionally what would be known as VDI. Again, they're used interchangeably. And most people don't really care either way, but I think it's good for you to understand it, if you happen to do run against somebody that does care. And of course, desktop as a service. Desktop as a service is virtual desktops as a service. So just like what we do, right, we're removing those workloads, removing the procurement of licensing, removing the responsibility of actually needing to manage the environment away from the customer, and it's going to be sitting within a cloud provider's platform and being delivered to them as a service. This is important information for you to know, because when it comes to, it's not one size fits all within a box when it comes to DaaS. So it's good for you to know what are the differentiators, and then how is this typically deployed, because if you are asked what a non-persistent desktop or persistent desktop is, you don't need to be an expert, but at least you kind of generally understand what their ask is and what the requirements are. So starting at the top, session host versus dedicated. This is your traditional way of deploying virtual desktops. So a session host is what's called like a one-to-many. So if you think that there's a single server application that's running in there, and you have multiple people that are accessing their virtual desktops and sharing that compute resources in there, that's what a session host is. Very similar to like a remote desktop services, RDS, or traditional terminal services, and how that's done. This is a consistent experience. So each person does have their own desktop and their own image, but they are sharing those resources. Pros and cons. Pros are it scales. Economies of scales come into play. Anytime you're looking at sharing resources on the back end, it can help drive the cost down on a per user basis. Cons would be, probably the biggest one here is around your noisy neighbors. So if you think about, if you got 10 people sitting in a room, right, and one person is, everybody's kind of operating at the same decibel level, and you got one person's being loud, it kind of affects everything. Very similar with compute resources. You allocate CPU and RAM for that session host. If you have somebody in there that's performing a workload, such as an accounting application with multiple Excel spreadsheets pulled up, and they're hogging a lot of CPU, that in turn will then cause some performance degradation for those users around them. Now, there's ways for us to offset that, right? We typically can allocate certain users based off of their workloads by understanding what they need, so we can make sure that like C-level kind of has their own, and we're, more power users get more of an allocation of resources. Dedicated desktop on the other side is a one-to-one. So if you have 50 people, you've got 50 virtual machines, and there's 50 desktops. Those virtual machines are desktops. So that's a one-to-one. So that's going to eliminate the need for the noisy neighbor type work, right? Because that compute is allocated directly to you. And it's also going to provide a consistent experience for them, so we can make sure that we're isolating. It is pros and cons. Again, it can be a little bit more expensive because you are allocating specific compute for each one of those users versus sharing it. However, it depends. And just so you guys know, this isn't an all or nothing. You can have, let's say you have a 150 user business. You can have, let's say, 100 of them are what we call knowledge-based workers. They, accessing a single application, maybe some SaaS application, working at Microsoft 365, and they're kind of doing their thing, not really needing a lot of resources. We can basically allocate session hosts for those people, and then if you have a group of power users, maybe it's some accounting or maybe some C-level or whomever, then we can do dedicated desktops. So you can build a for lack of a better term, a hybrid type deployment, but it's good for you guys to know this. Citrix is one of those historical companies that uses session hosts. VMware Horizon does not use session hosts. They're all dedicated desktops. So getting into, past that piece of the actual provisioning of those environments, looking at what those desktops are. So there's persistent and there's non-persistent. If you think about a persistent desktop, think about your laptop. You pop open the laptop, you've got files saved there locally, you've got your applications that are there, you've got whatever personal stuff you need. Every time you open it up and close it, with the exception of maybe some restarting of applications, it's a persistent experience for you. Versus a non-persistent, where it's basically a clean image. So persistent desktop, meaning that if you've got 50 users and you're running 50 persistent desktops, user 1 is assigned to desktop 1. User 2 is assigned to desktop 2. And that stays consistent. If they log out, they log back in, they're still getting, user 1 is getting virtual desktop 1. User 2 is getting virtual desktop 2. Whereas on a non-persistent desktop side, if you have 50 users it's more of a pooled thing. So user one could log into, if they're the first one to log in, they might get desktop one. If they log out and then log back in later in the day, they could be on, virtual desktop 39. It doesn't matter. The experience is going to be the same because we use what's called profiles that carry with them. So their settings and their things of that nature and their administrative privileges are all built into the desktop. So it's not it doesn't change from a experience on the customer side. Now, who would want persistent desktops? Potentially CEOs, CFOs, people who just want to kind of have some things stored there locally, things of that nature. Pros and cons. One of the biggest cons for a persistent desktop is it's not a clean image every time they log in. So if they do happen to be out there, browsing the web and they pick up some type of virus or malware, when they log back out and they log back in, it's still going to be there. In a non-persistent experience, when they log back out, it's basically a clean image when they log back in. So any of those types of trash that they would pick up, for lack of a better term, along the way, would not be there anymore. I'll kind of pause for a second. Rob, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just think it's important when you're having a conversation with customers to ask about the applications and do some discovery too. Because, for instance, there's applications out there right now like VPN clients and some other apps, an increasing number of apps that actually during the install process will look at the operating system. And if it's a Windows server, they actually stop the install. So you're required to do some kind of dedicated desktop with a Windows 10 or a Windows 8.1 OS on it. The other thing I'd mention is that, again, around the same theme of application discovery, if there's applications out there that are older, and there's some older accounting apps out there that do this, if they have to install information on the C drive, on the OS volume, that's the point you're really going to need that persistent desktop, because you lose that ability with non-persistent.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? Installing applications locally on the desktop, have them, yeah, absolutely. So again, guys, this isn't something that we want you to be obviously experts at, but just kind of know what the differences are. So, when you are asked about it, or if you do get into these conversations, you kind of have the ammo to be like, okay, I get that, right? I know what you're saying. Okay, so from here, part of this, a big portion of this and a driving factor of this topic here in general is I wanted to people to understand what's out there. I think a lot of people that are kind of born and raised in the channel, you understand a lot about Rapid Scale does virtual desktops. We're known to do virtual desktops. This is what we do. Citrix, historically Citrix, and some VMware. But the question is, what's outside of the channel? What else? What other options are customers going to have if they put the initiative in place to move to a desktop as a service or a virtual desktop type environment? What are all the options they have, so you're able to kind of not necessarily combat, but guide them and make sure that they're making the right decision. So I'm going to, being that Rob here is the industry expert in this space and has taught me a lot about what I know, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Rob to kind of give you an idea of what are some of the providers and just a general lay of the land.
Yeah, on the Amazon and Microsoft side, I mean, they've got cloud-based platforms that are affordable and pretty easy to get into. One of the challenges there is difficult to move off that platform. If you ever want to migrate to a different platform or a different provider, that becomes very difficult. It's basically a tear down and rebuild. The other interesting thing is that Amazon and Microsoft don't offer a lot of customer support or managed services or guided implementation around their products. You kind of have to work with a partner that specializes in that specific product to be able to get those services. On the Citrix and VMware side, obviously we host those platforms. We host and other providers do as well. They host the infrastructure. They manage that completely. There's flexible models you can use. Citrix and VMware have both come out with tools that provide the ability to store the control plane or the configuration management up in their cloud. And then you can either have the desktops in your environment or in a provider's environment or even in the Microsoft Windows virtual desktop environment. So there's some flexibility there if you use those platforms. And obviously a lot of partners wrap, the guided onboarding, the support and IT admin, end user support and IT admin support, and the managed services, the managed configuration around the Citrix and VMware platforms. Citrix and VMware are a little bit easier to integrate with IaaS than in particular Amazon Workspace. There's some tools you can use to make IaaS-based applications very seamlessly accessed by your DaaS users. Those are the major differences there.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Obviously, Citrix, VMware are your traditional delivery protocols is what you would categorize them as. So companies in the past that they've done VDI, they're typically using Citrix or VMware to accomplish that. Obviously proprietary providers like like Rob mentioned with AWS and Azure. Azure WVD. Those are kind of proprietary type type solutions there. So they're tougher to migrate off of, and you're going to have some type of third party. You're going to do it yourself management, or you're going to have some type of third party that goes in there. The other side of this, which is kind of what I could refer to, I don't know if it's the right terminology or not, but the middleware aspect is there are other kind of enablement companies. We don't have them up here, but if you've been reading up on, you notice like the CloudJumper acquisition by NetApp. CloudJumper is kind of one of those middleware companies that helps for federation services and enabling a hybrid type of deployment. So there is some, once you start getting a little bit more up market, I would say there's going to be kind of some of those third tier or type players. I wouldn't say third tier, but third party players that integrate within specific workloads and help to transfer those across multiple platforms. Okay, this slide is interesting. So we actually pulled this data. So we pulled this off of Gartner. And what this is, I think everybody understands within the channel, especially is around managed services. A lot of companies bring on an as-a-service provider because they're able to bring a level of experience and expertise to enable them to be able to leverage this technology. So I'll let Rob kind of explain this a little bit because it's a pretty cool slide to kind of demonstrate really like who's responsible for what and how is it possibly done, and then of course some are one of the advantage. So go ahead, Rob.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the first column there, VDI, that says, and we talked about before, that's a customer premise, VDI solution, usually running Citrix or VMware, and that's the customer managing it. They're hosting it. They're providing all the services and all the infrastructure around that. There are some providers out there that will manage a customer premise VDI, and that's the second column. So the customer still still hosts the infrastructure, but they're getting some level of managed service from an outside provider. IaaS is another offering where it kind of flips the script a little bit, where the provider's hosting the infrastructure and the customer's using that infrastructure to be able to meet their business needs. When you start to get into DaaS, that's really where you're starting to get into a situation where the provider is playing much more of an overarching role, where the provider's hosting the infrastructure and the control plane. The provider's offering identity and access management, so they're extending things like Active Directory from the customer's environment up into that DaaS environment, so users can log on with their normal IDs. Providers help out the customer with image management. They'll help install the applications that the users will need and configure that image so when the users log in, it's exactly what they need. And they perform other value-added services as well. If you think about add-ons like SD-WAN, which complements DaaS very well, Office 365 is obviously a big one. Almost every DaaS customer needs those email and productivity apps, web content filtering. Those sort of things are able to be added on by that provider and have it be a very seamless experience for the end user.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And I think one of the big things to kind of see here is, simplifying it all, is from a desktop as a service perspective, this portion right here, control plane maintenance, infrastructure, storage, hosting space, is all handled by the provider. That's a big undertaking, right? But it's also a big responsibility for customers, right, to have that offloaded from their plate, because you're now no longer worrying about that sustainability of the infrastructure. So that's a big portion of it. And then obviously the customizability of the shared workloads in terms of application management, image management, right? Everybody kind of has their own co-managed model, right, or fully managed from that sense. Service scope. So as people are getting into more opportunities and as desktops as a service becomes options and customers are really looking for it, it's obviously important that first of all who's who, who's doing what, but also like what are some of the characteristics and some of the functions that a good DaaS provider should have within their service offering. So obviously first and foremost, you kind of take a look at this. And this is a relatively granular list, but it makes sense because what you wanted to do is, the key is you don't want to put your customer in a position with a provider that's going to have a ceiling around what they're capable of doing from a growth perspective. So an example for that would be single sign-on, right? Very simple, very basic stuff for some. But, if they want to just, we're just going to be publishing applications today, but then they want to look at integrating 365 and single sign-on with a SAML and third-party applications that are not being hosted by the DaaS provider, and the ability to tie all that in to have that single sign-on capability. those are big. So I think it's not only, understanding what do they need right now, but, beginning with the end in mind and where they're going to go. What are some of the other potential features and functions that the company wants to be able to leverage to tie in and make sure that there's the right provider to be able to handle all those asks and those growths. Rob, question, obviously you've been around the space for a while, you know a lot of providers. What are some areas that you typically see from a hosting provider, a DaaS hosting provider perspective of shortcomings or gaps that they don't offer?
Well, there's certain firms that specialize in regulatory things like HIPAA and high trust and PCI, for instance. But where, a lot of providers do things like GPU support, which is advanced graphics and processing for applications that demand it. They all have some form of identity management that they're performing. The two things in this list where you really find a lot of variation and some frankly fall a little short are managed services and end user support. On the managed services side, that's really about enabling customers to unlock the full value of their DaaS investment. And it creates a really sticky relationship between the partner and the customer. And it's basically just having the customer be able to explain the outcomes they want within the DaaS environment. And the partner goes and handles all the backend configuration and all the management of that. They don't have to learn Citrix. They don't have to learn VMware. The partners handle all that for them. End user support is huge too. A lot of providers don't provide that because it really requires kind of a different way of working internally within the provider's organization. That's really about getting that workload off the customer organization and into the same service provider that's managing and controlling the desktops and the configuration. It's really attractive when you're talking to a customer and saying, look, I can offer you all these DaaS features. We can manage the whole environment for you. We can manage the configuration. You don't need to learn the product. Just tell us what you need to happen and we'll make it happen. And we'll support your end users, and your IT staff can focus on more strategic things like line of business app support and those sort of things. So those are the two places most often where there's some variation.
Completely agree. Well said. Okay, we're starting to wrap this thing up here, guys. So just wanted to bear with us. And again, we'll make sure we get this out. We can set up conversations furthermore to kind of dig in. So looking at the different type of, I wouldn't call them necessarily providers, but more of the different types of solutions that are out there that people are looking for. So you really categorize it into three. You have cloud native solutions, proprietary hybrid solutions, and then specialty cloud desktops. Fortunately, at Rapscale, we kind of fit in all three of these buckets, which is obviously advantageous for us. But it's good for you to understand this. So first of all, if you look at cloud native solutions, this is basic, hosting, parking applications and data within a data center or a hyperscaler, spinning up a Citrix farm or a VMware Horizon farm or RDP or whatever it would be, and pushing those applications and desktops out to the end user. This is really where customer wants to bring in a new technology. They do not have the in-house expertise or the know-how or even the bandwidth, essentially, to be able to do this for them. Next is proprietary hybrid. So this is more of a, using multiple, integrating within multiple different cloud, premise versus cloud-based hyperscalers. There's typically a mix of some type of DIY. An example of this would be, there's actually a large bank that we are working with, and they were running a VMware Horizon environment, and they also had a large on-premise, actually co-located infrastructure. They did not want to move their core line of business applications and data out to the cloud, but they wanted to outsource their virtual desktop farm, right? Their Horizon farm. So in this case, it would be a hybrid because we were going to be having our, in this case, it would be VMware Horizon or HDaaS running within our data center. We have a direct connect into their on-premise exchange or on-premise or co-located, infrastructure, and then we push out the applications from there. So we basically, they said, hey, we're not very good at this. We could use some help, but we just need help with this. So we basically become a node off their production infrastructure, tying into it, and then managing that experience that they're accessing. So that's kind of where the proprietary, right, where it's not something you see every day, but there is certainly, it certainly does happen, especially when you start getting more up market. And then the specialty cloud desktops. These are going to be industry specific. Maybe if there's, like FedRAMP, right, government type stuff that's got some type of compliances and regulations. GPU or graphic processing units, which is like, Revit, AutoCAD, that's going to kind of fit within this bucket as well. Where there's something that's a little bit unique that they're doing, that you kind of have to build a specialty around for that. Again, these are going to be, for the most part, Citrix and VMware based. Okay, so this one here, I'm going to let Robert speak to this here real quickly. Definitely don't want to spend too much time on this one, but and again, you guys are going to get this. This is basically a comparative matrix around the different, basically the main delivery protocols or DaaS offerings that are out there. So Robert, just kind of real quick, if you just want to highlight a few areas on here that you see, and then we'll kind of get into the next one as well. The next slide.
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, this is an excellent reference guide where you're looking at customers' requirements and kind of finding a right fit. But the two big differences here with Citrix and VMware, you have some flexibility around things like authentication, things like identity. There's different tools you can use. To some extent, you're locked in with specific tools from Microsoft and Amazon. The other thing I'd mention here is that the control plane, that configuration ability within Citrix and VMware has been very mature over a number of years. Microsoft's Windows Virtual Desktop platform has been out since, I believe, October of last year. They still have a little bit of immaturity in the control plane, but there are a lot of third-party vendors like CloudJumper, who Andrew alluded to earlier, and Nerdio that are kind of filling that gap and kind of filling that from a third-party perspective and providing that for WVD. So interesting to see how that evolves, but obviously Citrix and VMware are very mature technologies to have those control planes already pretty well established.
Yeah, and again, good for you guys to have. If somebody's evaluating, desktop as a service, if there's certain things that are more important to them than others, like, right, such as multi-factor authentication, support identity providers, you guys have this information so you can help guide them to make the right decision. Okay, second to the last one. I'm going to hand this over to Robert here for a second. So essentially, we wanted to, if you guys didn't know this already, but obviously we did Citrix. We also have a VMware Horizon offering as well, so kind of two different flavors. With this, so I'll let kind of Robert speak to a little bit about the solutions, what we have going on, and then we'll wrap this thing up with a few questions.
Yeah, a couple of things here we're doing that some providers don't do. We're offering native Windows 10 desktops on those dedicated desktops, non-persistent and persistent. We include 2 master images and OS level antivirus, anti-malware on the desktop for customers. We do 24/7 direct support for IT staff, and we include managed services as part of the offer. So that's included when you buy it. With our VMware offer, the 24/7 direct support is an add-on, but it's very affordable. And we highly recommend it for customers that really want to get out of the support game and be able to offload that to their partners that are also controlling the desktop experience. Beautiful.
And guys, if you guys ever want to see a demo of these, right, Citrix versus VMware next to each other, it's pretty vanilla, right? There's not really much difference in either one of them. But if you are curious and you would like to see it, we're certainly happy to set up a time to do that. Last, the TLA, right? So I don't know if you guys have done the Technology Leadership Academy. Again, I apologize in advance if you have and you had to listen to me talk about stuff, but we're going to continue to expand on that, right? I mean, again, I think that there's a level of granularity that goes into a lot of these solutions that we're going to continue to do and evolve and make some videos for. So again, make sure you check it out. It's great. It's good information, had a lot of good feedback. And again, apologize in advance for my participation. Okay, that wraps it up. We got a few minutes left. So Summer, we have some questions that we want to run through.
Yes, the first couple are pretty good for clarification. So would a Citrix environment be considered VDI or DaaS?
So it depends on where it's sitting. If a Citrix environment is sitting on premise within a customer's infrastructure they're managing, it's VDI. If it's Rapid-Scale offering it, it's considered DaaS. So VDI and DaaS is more about who's responsible for it and where it's sitting, not so much the actual protocol.
Okay. And another good one here for clarification. Why do you keep using the word Horizon when you're talking about VMware?
Because that's what they call it. That's what they call their offering. It's called VMware Horizon. That's what their delivery. It's a PCO-IP delivery protocol, but they brand it VMware Horizon. Like Citrix is called Citrix. Actually, what is the name for? What do they call it? Workspaces now? Is that what it is?
Yeah, they've changed it a few times. Yeah, it's Workspace right now.
So Citrix Workspaces. That's what their virtual desktop technology is, and then VMware has Horizon. That's what they call it. It used to be called View. Now it's called Horizon.
Okay, this one. On single sign-on, do all the platforms and apps load on a single pane of glass? I don't remember what this was in reference to particularly.
So no, single sign-on basically just gives you the ability to sign on one time. So let's say if you were logging into your virtual desktop, and you log in with your username or credentials. Then you go access Salesforce or some other type of SaaS ERP, right? Web access application. You wouldn't have to sign in again. You'd already be signed in because it's all tied into Active Directory, into the domain. So it just basically just eliminates the need to go in there and put your username or credentials in for all the different applications that you access on a daily basis.
Okay, and we'll just do a couple more here before we wrap up. Is there a minimum user account for DaaS?
Rob, I'll let you answer that question.
Yeah, it's typically about 25 users. That's where it really becomes economical regarding the infrastructure that we have to set up for it and the cost of the desktop. So 25 is typically the minimum.
Okay, and then we'll wrap up with this one, and I've written down others so that we can send them out and follow up. But can you speak more to the sweet spot for DaaS, including verticals?
Yeah, so I mean, from a vertical side of the house, I mean, we see it. I mean, today, right? Financial, healthcare, manufacturing. You know, they still are and very much continue to be. You know, the predominant verticals that we're seeing. Healthcare specifically. You know, the sweet spot is going to be a typically larger SMB, mid-market customer, you know, brick and mortar, multi-location, where they're looking to make sure they're standardizing their, standardizing experience for the employees across the board, giving the ability to access those applications in a secure manner without having to be under the same walls as an IT staff. And then also, typically companies that have, limited, kind of less, on the IT side, less heavy on the IT side, right? So limited employees, it certainly helps them to have this type of service in here because you can then kind of take away a lot of their daily sustainability stuff, such as, patching of the infrastructure, but at the same time also enabling somebody that, could not do this for themselves before to bring in this new technology. So, Robbie, anything you want to add to that in terms of the sweet spot?
Yeah, I just think that a lot of things we hear from customers that are kind of buying triggers are when they're going to implement a mobility strategy, a bring your own device strategy, or work from home strategy. That's where DaaS really starts to play well.
Agreed.
All right.
Anything else, Summer? Okay. Perfect. Well, everybody listening, thank you. Again, appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. Hope you're able to get something out of this, of course. Hope everybody's staying safe within these times. We're certainly looking forward to getting back to business as usual and getting out in front of everybody and seeing everyone. I know we're all starting to miss that a little bit, but again, thank you for your time. If you have any questions, certainly reach out to Summer. We can make sure we get some stuff back to you, and then obviously put you in touch with whoever your regional support is at Rapiscale. So other than that, you guys have a great day. Be safe and look forward to speaking or seeing everybody very soon. Thank you.